And welcome to the January 2010 meeting of the FCC. A belated Happy New Year to everyone. Before we proceed with our agenda, I'd like to say a few words about the situation in Haiti. And we'll be hearing a presentation as well. It's been a week now since the devastating earthquake in Haiti. As we all know, the situation there is serious and tragic, and the U.S. relief and recovery effort is of great importance. As you'll hear in a minute, the FCC has been working hard to support the relief and recovery efforts, of course focusing on the vital role of communications services. The tragic situation in Haiti reminds us that communication services are indispensable in times of crisis. To the victims for connecting with family members and seeking help, as well as to emergency operations, which of course rely on communications to coordinate the delivery of food, water, medical equipment, to save lives, to deliver other essential services. The earthquake devastated Haiti's communications infrastructure. The wireline network is down completely. 2 of the 4 wireless networks are down, and the other 2 are struggling to stay up. Even in these circumstances, we've seen vivid examples of how communications can save lives in a crisis. We heard about 5 people trapped for 5 days in the rubble of a collapsed grocery store who were rescued after a text message calling for help was finally received. Many others have been rescued as a result of mobile communications. Imagine what Haiti would be like now if no mobile service was available at all. Beyond mobile voice and text, we've heard about a survivor who was trapped in rubble for 65 hours and used a first aid app on his iPhone to fashion a tourniquet for his leg and to treat a head wound and to stay alive long enough to be rescued. We've heard about a woman in Denver who was able to find her newly adopted Haitian daughter after a story appeared on cable news about the destruction of the child's orphanage. We've heard about how Twitter and other social media have helped spread news, as well as how text messages have helped raise many millions of dollars to support the emergency response. The same is true for other forms of media, both new and traditional. These examples underscore the vital importance of a universally available communications infrastructure that works in times of crisis. In the crisis in Haiti lies not only our obligation to help those in need, but important lessons for the future, including here at home. I want to recognize and express my deep appreciation for the efforts of our FCC staff who have been working day and night to support the rescue and recovery efforts, including a team that arrived in Haiti on Monday. I'm pleased that the International Bureau and the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau are spearheading the agency's efforts and are doing so effectively. Other bureaus, including the Wireless Enforcement and Consumer Bureaus, have been engaged as well, as has the Media Bureau, which within 24 hours of the earthquake had granted a waiver to allow non-commercial broadcasters to raise money for victims. Our staff has worked closely with private communications carriers on relief efforts, as it would if a similar crisis struck the United States. I'd like to acknowledge the many material contributions made by a broad cross-section of the communications and media industries, too many to list, but all are appreciated and say volumes about American values. Manufacturers and communications companies, for example, have provided calling cards, free calls to and from Haiti, satellite capacity, mobile and satellite handsets, emergency base stations and generators. Companies are offering innovative ways to raise money to support the relief efforts, changing their policies to make sure that money contributed gets to victims faster, and to help families locate loved ones. Again, we appreciate those efforts. And now I'd like to ask Mindell de la Torre and Admiral Jamie Barnett to give the Commission an update on the situation in Haiti and the Commission's activities. Mindell and Jamie, you have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. We will be providing an update on the FCC's work to assist in the many efforts that you know are going on from here in the United States as well as around the world in the aftermath of the January 12th earthquake in Haiti. This is the first time that I've actually addressed the Commission at an open meeting. And on the one hand, I'm really sorry that it's the events in Haiti that bring me into this chair. But on the other, I have to say that I am so proud of the FCC and the people in all the different bureaus that the Chairman mentioned who have come together to work throughout the weekend, throughout the holiday and everything else, and are putting in a lot of hours and a lot of time and effort. And it's very heartening to see. So for that reason, I'm glad that I'm here. We are very grateful, actually, for the support that the Chairman has also given us and everybody else. As you know, the efforts that the FCC is going through are to support the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. They are the U.S. government's lead agency for the Haiti effort, and so staff from throughout the Commission has been working with USAID to support it and an interagency group that we've been working with. And we actually have one person who's housed at USAID now. In support of USAID, the FCC continues to provide communications expertise regarding both domestic and international communications, as well as the disaster recovery. Since last week, the FCC has been working daily and nightly, as the Chairman said, with our colleagues and partners across the U.S. government, at the private sector, and representatives from companies that are actually providing the needed services in Haiti. And this is to identify the communications situation and related requirements there. I'm especially pleased to say that, as the Chairman reported in a public notice this weekend, we finally established contact with our counterpart in Haiti, Mr. Montaigne Marcelin. He's the Director General of CONATEL, the regulator there. And since then, I've been able to talk with him on numerous occasions. It's very spotty, obviously, our conversations, and he usually is the one that ends up calling me because it's very hard to get into the country. But we're working with him and USAID and our federal partners to determine how best to help him. And he met yesterday with some of the FCC staff that are there. So that was a great meeting, and we look forward to working more with him. Now I'd like to give you a little bit of the status of telecommunications in Haiti before the earthquake and post the earthquake. So to give you a context for the current situation, we'll talk a little bit about the basic services prior to January 12th. It was extremely limited, the situation there before, and now, of course, it suffered a lot of damage, and many communication services are either not operating, as the Chairman said, or are operating on compromised networks, and they're all on backup sources of energy. And I think that's something that's very important. It's a huge issue for the operators.
May I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
Just so, you might want to mention the pictures that are being shown.
Yes. And since I was looking down, I didn't see the pictures. There are pictures right now on the screen here in the Commission meeting room of the FCC team that is down in Haiti, and it's pictures of what they took yesterday. There's also some pictures there of Télécom Sans Frontières, which is one of the organizations that's providing free telephone service for Haitians back to the United States. And some of you know Paul Margie, who worked with them, and he is on his way actually today down to Haiti to work with them. So you'll see those pictures, and we're very proud of them. There they are with the equipment right now. So the fixed line services in Haiti were basically provided by a state-owned monopoly called Teleco before the earthquake. According to the ITU, in 2009, there were about 108,000 wireline telephone lines in the country of 9.8 million people. The government of Haiti and the businesses were basically the primary users of that wireline network. Basically, today, the wireline network in Port-au-Prince appears to not be functioning at all. As in many developing countries, the principal means of communications in Haiti is mobile phone services. There are 4 mobile networks operating in Haiti: Comcel, Digicel, Haytel, and Rectel. Before the earthquake, there were about 2.5 million cellular users that were active in Haiti, meaning that about 3 out of 10 Haitians had cell phone, while, as I said before, only 1 out of 100 in Haiti had access to wireline services. Today, mobile phone service in Port-au-Prince is functioning, and it is really the principal manner of communicating within Port-au-Prince, and basically all over Haiti. I think that's the way that it is. Large numbers of cell sites, however, have come out of service, and the coverage can be quite spotty. And because there's extremely high calling volumes, they're having an overload on their networks, and so there's some continuing problems with some call completion issues. Mobile service in the rest of Haiti is functioning, but it's very vulnerable due to the lack of fuel. There were 5 ISPs in the country and about 1 million internet users before the earthquake, and broadband services were basically de minimis. They hardly existed. But today, the largest ISP is probably one of the success stories. It's operating at about 85% capacity, and it has 8 of its 60 towers, even with 8 of its 60 towers down. Before the quake, there were 18 TV stations and about 40 FM radio stations. There really weren't any AM stations. But today, due to the damage to the infrastructure for the radio and television services, evidently one of the hilltops where a lot of the towers were was severely damaged. Only 2 TV stations are operating, and many radio stations are off the air. 4 numbers are assigned for E911 emergency services in the country. However, even before the quake, they were not nearly as robust as ours in the United States. So if you had called the number, there would not necessarily be a chance that somebody would come to help you. But both of the public safety answering point, both of the PSAPs in Port-au-Prince were completely destroyed by the earthquake. And so there's no functioning emergency 911 service at all in the country. There are no U.S. licensed cables with landing points in Haiti. The American Region Caribbean Ring System has landing points in neighboring Dominican Republic, and they report that the earthquake did not damage their cable. However, the building housing the cable facilities that there are in Haiti's primary international connection was completely destroyed. So as a result, international connectivity is substantially degraded. Satellite services were available in Haiti before the earthquake, but not really widely used. Now the situation is completely different. Satellite telephone, services are obviously being relied on by most of the relief workers and the NGOs and the first responder entities, as well, that are supporting as well as the Haitian government. And as you stated, Mr. Chairman, sort of new media has also been important to Haiti after the earthquake for communications and reporting and for getting news on loved ones. And, finally, interestingly, we found some of the same issues and challenges that we faced in domestic disasters regarding communications, so the destruction of infrastructure, fuel, the lack of alternative power sources, security and access to sites are also issues in Haiti. So now I'll turn to Jamie Barnett, the Chief of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, for highlights of our FCC activities.
Dale, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. First, let me say in the wake of this disaster that it is a privilege to work with Mendel De La Torre and the International Bureau team. She is providing superb creative leadership, and it's absolutely providential to have a team leader who speaks French in this instance. I'm also proud to see the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau team in action, as well as the members of the Enforcement Bureau and so many people from across the Commission. They're active and fully engaged. As Mendel mentioned, the FCC Project Roll Call team is down there. It's a signals analysis team that was created during Hurricane Katrina and has the capability to sweep most of the RF spectrum for any activity. Our roll call team down there, and you've seen the pictures now, are Richard Lee from my bureau, Juan Silva Basora, and then Joe Husney from the Enforcement Bureau. He is stationed down in Tampa and is deployed with them. And they go down with a FEMA mobile emergency response communications unit, or you may have heard of the MERS unit, and they are located at the embassy in Port-au-Prince. I talked to Rich Lee this morning after the 6.1 aftershock to make sure that they're okay. We were really glad to be able to talk to them. They are okay. One of the reasons for that is their living conditions, like so many in Port-au-Prince right now, are out in the open. They're sleeping on tents, so there was no danger from falling debris. We've also contacted their families to let them know that they are doing well, albeit under the same adverse conditions. The first 4 hours sweep of the roll call unit indicated that there are some 30 of the 40 FM stations in the 30-mile radius around the embassy that are on the air. There are no AM stations transmitting within that area. The signals analysis equipment shows a great deal of land mobile radio activity, and they're working with the Haitian Conatel technicians to identify which systems are operating. So far, our report is that the FEMA team there is very pleased to have this information. They consider the roll call unit mission to be a high priority part of their mission. The next mission is underway this morning. The roll call unit team is going about 15 kilometers from the embassy to run another sweep. They do have a security detachment, and they luckily have a technician from Conatel, which we hope will yield even more information that will be helpful to the recovery and to the government of Haiti. Rich Lee has delivered an FCC sat phone to the Director General to facilitate our communications with him and to help with his work. We'll continue to coordinate the activities of these Haitian authorities and to do whatever we can to help them. In other activities, as Mendel mentioned, the Media Bureau issued a news release on the procedures for non-conforming education shows to follow to waive commission rules for fundraising appeals to support relief efforts, and the stations have been very grateful for this and with great results. It's also doing outreach to U.S. industries regarding broadcast efforts underway to help Haitian and future efforts. The wireless telecommunication bureaus has done outreach to cellular carriers. And then to kind of report on some of Mendel's news here, the International Bureau has issued a public notice to ease procedures for satellite applications to help emergency communication services initiate, resume, and maintain operations in the areas affected by the earthquake. The International Bureau also has been working with the International Telecommunications Union and CITEL, the Organization of American States Telecommunications Committee, to canvass international and regional communications assistance efforts. The FCC Haiti team is participating in daily NCS, National Communication System, conference calls with our federal partners, and this has yielded us a great deal of information and allowed us to contribute to it. It also has the Haitian communication carriers on the line with us, and U.S. communication carriers and suppliers, and we discuss the current state of communications in Haiti, the intermediate communication requirements and offers, as well as mid- and long-term communication recovery issues and plans. And just a little bit more about other people that are contributing to this. We have another Enforcement Bureau field engineer, Anthony Burgos, who is deployed to the U.S. Southern Command headquarters in Miami to support frequency management activities in Haiti. Alan Manuel on the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau staff is deployed to the USAID Headquarters Operations Center as our liaison officer, and he's coordinating our efforts in supporting Zing Huang, Special Assistant to the USAID Administrator for telecommunications issues. We have offered USAID additional personnel in the event that they wish to establish a communications restoration planning team and a federal systems-level technical assessment team for deployment to Haiti. As we work with the help to help the people of Haiti, and as our heart continues to go out to them in their extreme suffering, my mind also goes to our own preparation for disaster, and we will continue to be vigilant in our preparations. We will continue to examine such things as undersea cable vulnerability, and of course we're going to continue to work toward the National Interoperable Public Safety Broadband Network. And with that, I would turn it back to Mendel.
Well, thank you, Jamie. In conclusion, basically, the FCC team will continue its efforts to support the government and the private sector and the nonprofit entities that are helping Haiti in their critical mission communications there. We'll continue to provide updates to the Commission and the public as information becomes available. We do have a blog that is on the website called Helping Haiti, and we hope to have postings that are regularly put there. Sometimes our other work gets in the way of updating that, but we'll do that as much as possible. And we look forward to working with all of our colleagues around the FCC and within the other government agencies on this important work. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Excellent report. Let me ask my commissioners if they'd like to make any comments or ask questions. Commissioner Copps?
Well, thank you. What can you say? Actions are all really eloquent here, and all those wrenching images coming out of Haiti moved us all to action. I do want to commend the chairman for a superb job in mobilizing our resources, namely our skilled and dedicated FCC team, and assigning it to work in collaboration with our federal partners and with the communications industry and with our counterpart in Haiti, Comitel. Our own experience in this country showed us how critical communications are in responding to and recovering from disasters like this, as the chairman said, emergency responder communications and communications with relief agencies and connecting families. More than 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to see firsthand the impact that Hurricane Katrina had on the communications infrastructure down on the Gulf Coast, and all the reports of damage from last Tuesday's earthquake demonstrate that this is an event where the damage is hard to believe, just magnitudes greater than Katrina. We can't even begin to conceptualize yet the extent of the work that will need to be done to restore communications to Haiti, let alone restoring the country of Haiti. That's a job not just for government agencies, but but for all of us as individual citizens. You know, a lot of money has already been raised, but so much more is going to be needed. This is an emergency that will last not just a few weeks, but months and years. The aftershocks here are not just physical, but they go to every dimension of the people's existence down there. So as we open up our hearts, we need to be mindful of the need to open up our checkbooks as individual citizens as we go forward on this. I want to join in publicly thanking our FCC team for the tireless efforts they are making to respond to this disaster, the round-the-clock work that Mindell and Admiral Barnett and all the bureaus that have been involved here have done, and the whole intra and inter-agency effort that is working so hard to bring aid and assistance to Haiti. They're making a difference already, and it's inspirational just to see this. And I want to mention once again the five very important individuals who are not here today, because they are Alan Manuel, as you said, with USAID, Anthony Burgos with the U.S. Southern Command, and then Richard Lee and Juan Silva and Joe Husney, who are on the ground in Haiti in considerably less than even minimal conditions of existence, and we all owe them a huge debt of gratitude. So I thank them and their families for the personal sacrifices that they are making to help the good people of Haiti in their hour of maximum need. And I certainly join everybody up here in wishing them not only success in their dedicated work, but a safe return home soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner McDowell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, and want to thank the chairman and all my colleagues, and of course the whole FCC team for everyone's leadership in swiftly putting ideas into action to assist the people of Haiti in the midst of this extremely tragic plight that they find themselves in. And I'd like to thank everyone that Commissioner Copps just mentioned. And as we've learned from past emergencies, it is critical that communities are able to maintain a functioning communication system after a disaster such as this hits, so that first responders can communicate, so victims can reach out for help, and so survivors can contact and reassure their loved ones. Certainly my thoughts and prayers are with the victims and with the heroes that are down there, including our own FCC team, among many, many others, who are working day and night to save these precious lives and care for those affected, and to reunite families and friends. And so my hats off to everyone. Commissioner Copps is absolutely right. This will be a project that's really probably measured in terms of years, and so we all need to stay focused on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn?
I would like to thank and acknowledge everyone who did not think, as I grew up hearing, that it was robbery to dedicate their talents and resources to the persons in a country involved in just the most horrific set of natural circumstances that we can imagine. I grew up listening to my grandfather, who was a minister, and listening to my father, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes not, speaking of the story of the Good Samaritan. And one of the things that I remember clearly, one question, which is also a challenge that I remember learning even at a young age or hearing at a young age, was the question of who is your neighbor? We have shown by our commitment, by our courage, by our dedication, by our willingness to help those in need, we have shown our neighbors that we are their neighbors, and we are compassionate, and we are willing to do what it takes to stabilize and connect those persons to their families and to reestablish those beautiful people in Haiti to some semblance of decency. So I want to join in my thanks, to all of you, to all of those in the sound of my voice. Thank you all for what you will do, what you are doing, and for recognizing who is your neighbor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the strong statement that you took the time to issue over the weekend. Commissioner Baker?
You all have already eloquently said anything that I might have said, so I just want to add my voice to echoing the heartfelt thanks that I have for our team and for everyone that's helping in this devastating tragedy. I really appreciate it. I know it's hard work and long hours, and it's going to be for quite a while. So thank you. Also to the companies that have mobilized support, whether it's mobile or satellite or VoIP, or all of you, your heartfelt giving is important, and our thoughts and our prayers go out to the people of Haiti continuously.
Thank you very much, and I agree. It's hard to match, and I won't try the eloquence of what we heard from our colleagues. Let me wrap up this topic by, one, thanking again Admiral Barnett and Mindell de la Torre. The Commission is just extremely well served to have the leadership that it has in the International Bureau, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. I won't upset anyone by listing the number of years each of you has worked in the Navy, in the international community, focused on communications, but we're seeing right now the fruits of some of that in the way that you've organized the staff of the Commission to respond so effectively to this crisis. And we know here, all of us, that you've been working very hard on public safety, homeland security, preparedness here. And we just couldn't appreciate more the leadership, your teams that have been working so hard, including, as you've all mentioned, the employees who are taking real risks with their lives and safety to be on the ground in Haiti, aiding our counterparts there. So greatly appreciated. You're serving the Commission and the country incredibly well. The second point that I'd like to emphasize is the coordination point. And I couldn't be more pleased with the coordination we're seeing inside the Commission, the intra-agency coordination. Now I can't remember who mentioned it, but the intra-agency coordination has been excellent, and the inter-agency coordination with our federal partners at USAID, at DHS, through FEMA and NCS, with Southcom, and it's been effective, action-oriented, helping assess the situation and efficiently coordinate aid. And third, again, the reminder that others have mentioned of how essential communications are in times of crisis. It's important that we notice this, that we redouble our efforts to make sure that our country is prepared for crisis, that we learn lessons from this to apply in the future. Communications play such an essential role immediately in terms of rescue and relief, and longer term in terms of rebuilding an economic and social infrastructure so that a community can sustain itself. So again, thank you very much. We appreciate it, and we'll send you back to work. There's a lot more to do. And as you're stepping down, let me welcome a delegation that is here as part of our visitors program. We have a delegation from China here today. We're glad you've joined us for this meeting. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the agenda for this morning's Commission meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you. Good morning, Commissioners. Today's agenda includes 2 items for your consideration and 1 presentation. First, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking harmonizing the Commission's rules regarding pre-recorded telemarketing calls with the Federal Trade Commission's recently amended telemarketing sales rule. Second, you will consider a report in order to further promote competition in the video distribution market through rules addressing terrestrial delivered cable-affiliated programming. Last on your agenda, you will hear a presentation on the status of the National Broadband Plan. This is your agenda for today. The first item will be presented by the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Joel Gurin, Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, will give the introduction.
Great. Thank you, Madam Secretary, and delighted to welcome Joel Gurin to the Commission, the new Chief of our Consumer Bureau. Joel Gurin joins the agency with a long and distinguished career of informing and empowering consumers. Began his career as an award-winning journalist covering health issues, and then moved to Consumer Reports, where he worked for 15 years and played a critical role in bringing Consumer Reports to the web, where it's become a trusted and respected resource for over 2 million American consumers. We're very fortunate to have Joel here at the FCC, joining other bureau chiefs. You have a tough act to follow, Mr. Gurin. But the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, as we've discussed, has such an important role, and you're incredibly qualified to lead it as the Bureau takes charge of the Commission's work to improve transparency and disclosure for consumers, as it develops state-of-the-art consumer information programs seizing the opportunities of information technology, as it transforms our Consumer Information Center into one that is fully responsive to consumers and spots trends for the entire agency, as it provides strong leadership on disability rights and tribal issues, and as it is the Commission's public voice to consumers and other groups. Communications devices and networks are, of course, becoming more and more essential to the fabric of daily lives of all Americans. It's hard to identify anything that ties together what we do more clearly than consumers. It's never been more important that we promote investment, innovation, competition in communications, and that we work every day to protect and empower consumers of communication services. In light of that, I'm announcing today the formation of a consumer task force at the Commission, led by Joel Gurin and the Consumer Bureau, with membership of the chiefs of all the bureaus, the General Counsel, the Chief of OET, and the Managing Director. The Consumer Task Force will play an essential role in ensuring that our proceedings take account of consumer interests across the board, that our consumer protection and empowerment policies apply consistently and reasonably across technologies and bureaus at the FCC, that the public is able to fully engage in our processes, and that the agency enhances the public's understanding of our work through state-of-the-art 21st century consumer information programs. It is an excellent thing that the FCC has a consumer bureau, but it's important that it be clear to everyone that consumer needs and concerns should be reflected across all agencies of the Bureau, and this task force will make sure that that happens. So thank you, Joel, for taking on that role. You have terrific leadership at the Consumer Bureau, including your deputies, Yul Kwan and Mark Stone. You have your hands full, and I'm pleased that we have a Consumer Bureau item on the agenda today. With that, let's proceed to the item.
Great, terrific. Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And before turning to today's item, I want to thank you for establishing the Consumer Task Force, which I will be very honored to chair, and which shows such a strong commitment to consumer initiatives by the Commission. It is really a privilege for me to head the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. It's really been, in many ways, an opportunity to bring not only my background, but to also work with such terrific colleagues in other bureaus as well, and such a strong staff at the Bureau. So thank you very much. We do have many opportunities to act on behalf of consumers, and today's item is one example. The issue at hand is the regulation of unwanted pre-recorded telemarketing messages, commonly known as robocalls, that are a major source of annoyance and concern for consumers. The notice of proposed rulemaking before you proposes several changes to the Commission's rules for these calls under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, and our overall goal here is to harmonize our rules with those of the Federal Trade Commission in areas where our rules have not been fully aligned with theirs. The proposed rules would require that telemarketers obtain consumers' written consent, which can also be given electronically, to receive these calls. The rules would also make it easier for consumers who do get the calls to opt out of receiving them. If the Commission adopts these measures, you will ensure that it is the consumer and not the telemarketer who determines which sales calls people receive at home over the telephone. I would like to thank the staff of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, along with the bureaus and offices who have collaborated with us to bring this NPRM to you today. With me at the table are Mark Stone, Deputy Chief of CGB, and Erica McMahon, Chief of CGB's Policy Division, and Erica will present the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This item proposes revisions to the Commission's telemarketing rules under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, or TCPA, in order to harmonize them with the Federal Trade Commission's recently amended telemarketing sales rule. Specifically, the item considers the issue of pre-recorded telemarketing calls, commonly referred to as robocalls, and seeks comment on harmonizing the Commission's rules on this subject with those of the FTC. As recently amended, the FTC's telemarketing sales rule is more restrictive than the Commission's rules governing pre-recorded telemarketing calls and certain other telemarketing practices. Whereas most entities that use pre-recorded telemarketing calls are subject to both agencies' telemarketing regulations and therefore must comply with the FTC's more restrictive standards, entities under the sole jurisdiction of this Commission, such as common carriers, banks, and insurance companies, are subject to less restrictive standards. In an effort to remove certain differences in the treatment of entities that operate outside of the FTC's jurisdiction and to further empower residential telephone subscribers to avoid receiving solicitations to which they object, the item seeks comment on conforming certain of the Commission's TCPA rules to the FTC's rules. In particular, the item seeks comment on 4 proposed changes to the Commission's rules. First, it seeks comment on requiring sellers and telemarketers to obtain telephone subscribers' express written consent, including electronic methods of consent, to receive pre-recorded telemarketing calls even when there exists an established business relationship between the caller and the consumer. Second, it seeks comment on exempting certain federally regulated healthcare-related calls from the general prohibition on pre-recorded telemarketing calls to residential telephone lines. Third, it seeks comment on a requirement that pre-recorded telemarketing calls include an automated, interactive mechanism by which a consumer who has agreed to receive such calls but who later has a change of heart may opt out of receiving future pre-recorded messages from a seller or telemarketer. Finally, the item seeks comment on adopting a per-campaign standard for measuring the maximum percentage of live telemarketing sales calls that a telemarketer lawfully may drop or abandon as a result of using automated dialing software or other dialing equipment. The item seeks comment on whether these proposed revisions would benefit consumers and industry by creating greater symmetry between the two agencies' regulations and by extending the FTC standards to regulated entities that are not currently subject to the FTC's rules. As Joel noted, the rule revisions proposed in the item would make no changes with respect to categories of pre-recorded message calls that are not currently covered by the Commission's rules. These categories include calls by or on behalf of tax-exempt nonprofit organizations, calls for political purposes, such as those by politicians or campaigns, commercial calls that do not contain advertisements, for example, calls that notify recipients of a flight cancellation or a school closing, and calls initiated for emergency purposes. The Bureau recommends adoption of the item presented and requests editorial privileges. Thank you for the opportunity to present the item to you today.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Is that the conclusion of the presentation? Good. No, thank you very much. Commissioner Copps.
Thank you. This is a good day for consumers and a good day for the Commission. It's a good item that you presented, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but it may well be that it was the Chairman's announcement of a consumer task force that will have even a greater long-term benefit for American consumers. What the Chairman has just announced brings the FCC back to where it was always supposed to be, a proactive consumer protection agency. The decisions this Commission makes affect consumers in so many ways, whether it's wireless devices or landline telephones or public safety or the media in as many dimensions. There is always a consumer impact. And that's why every item that we process and every decision that we make needs to be examined and judged for its impact on consumers. Too often in recent years we have lost sight of this, and it has cost consumers, and it has cost them a lot. Our lack of competitive focus in telecommunications over recent years is one example, and it raised consumer bills, I believe, by billions of dollars. Our blissful blessing of ever more media industry consolidation was another costly assault on consumer well-being, not to mention citizen well-being. And the list can go on and on. Today we put in place a mechanism to discourage that kind of decision-making. By improving coordination between and among our bureaus and offices, and by ensuring that a consumer perspective is brought to bear across the whole gamut of FCC issues, we take a huge step to ensure that our policies and rules are better attuned to the real-world concerns of Americans. Considering the consumer impacts of our decisions, no matter what bureau or office they come from, will be standard operating procedure going forward. You could say it always should have been that way, but it wasn't always that way, and now it's going to be. I am pleased that our new Consumer Affairs Bureau Chief, Joel Guerin, will manage this task force. He has experience, judgment, and consumer commitment made to order for this particular assignment, and he will be assisted by outstanding team members from all across our various bureaus and offices. And it's only fitting that he marks the beginning of his tenure today with a notice of proposed rulemaking that kicks off a consumer-focused proceeding in which we expand our goal to taken up some years ago when we implemented the Do Not Call registry, and then when we eliminated the expiration of the registry, of returning a measure of privacy and control to citizens, allowing each of us to choose limits on the telemarketing calls that we receive. The notice specifically addresses, as you said, pre-recorded telemarketing calls. It tentatively concludes that harmonizing the Commission's rules adopted pursuant to the Telephone Consumer Protection Act with the Federal Trade Commission's recently amended telemarketing sales rule would reduce the potential for consumer and industry confusion. I think that's pretty clear. I am pleased to support the item, and I look forward to an expeditious, I hope a very expeditious, conclusion to the entire proceeding as quickly as we can do it, and I express my gratitude to the Bureau for its work on teeing this up for us. One other dimension I just quickly mentioned, the well-being of consumers needs to be front and center not only in the issues that we address, but also in how we address those issues. So I heartily applaud the improvements this Commission has made under the Chairman's leadership and over the past year in transparency and consumer engagement while we consider the issues. The Commission is humming with activity, workshops and hearings and blogs and Facebook and MySpace, you name it, and the new FCC seems to be on it, and more is coming. It's wonderful, I think. So I think you can tell I'm pleased, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to working closely with you to realize the huge potential of which you put in place today.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioner McDowell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too would like to commend you for the creation of the Consumer Task Force. Look very much forward to working with you on this, and I think it's a great step forward and will help coordinate a lot of agency activity there and streamline and make us more efficient. So kudos to you for doing that. I also want to commend the Chairman and really the Commission staff overall for their work on updating the Commission's rules on robocalls. They always seem to come at the most inappropriate time in your life, so I think we're taking a prudent step forward here. I also, though, wanted to thank the Chairman for reinstating the practice of including the actual text of proposed rules in this notice of proposed rulemaking. As I've said for a long time now, notices of proposed rulemaking really should actually contain the text of proposed rules. So I think this will benefit the American public and Congress through the transparency that you're undertaking today, and hopefully with every major item we can do this going forward. In short, today's NPRM updates and does harmonize our rules with the Federal Trade Commission's counterpart rules, and in effect would reduce consumer confusion for those who wonder why they are receiving unsolicited robocalls from some entities but not from others. And over the years, consumers, including myself, have complained about unsolicited telemarketing calls, and especially the so-called robocalls, interrupting their lives, especially around dinner time and other important moments in your life. And there are two areas where this NPRM proposes to empower consumers to control what calls they receive. First, under the proposed rules, a consumer would only receive such calls if prior express written consent has been given by the consumer to the telemarketer, and for convenience sake, such consent could be given electronically. Second, robocalls would have to include an automated message that allows a consumer to opt out of receiving future calls. The proposal requires this message to be interactive so the consumer can elect to use the opt-out feature immediately. Now, this NPRM raises important questions regarding matters such as established business relationships, and as we go forward, I look forward to reviewing the record to examine that issue in particular. And finally, I note that these rules apply only to commercial calls, as was stated, and do not apply to political calls. So especially anyone watching in Massachusetts who might be sick of those from this weekend or going forward, this being an even-numbered year. But it also exempts nonprofit calls and, most importantly, emergency calls, which historically all of these have been held to higher standards of protection. And on that topic, I thank the staff for working with my office to ensure that the exemption for emergency calls includes all that are permitted under various statutes, which I've enumerated in my written comments. So thank you very much. Good going. Look forward to launching this and seeing where we end up. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn?
First, I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I am very pleased that the chairman has created a new task force focused on consumers. As I've said since my first day at the Commission, we must continue to strive to make decisions that best protect and empower consumers. It is a job of every employee at this agency to think about how our actions impact consumers. I look forward to working with Joe, he gave me permission to call him by his first name, and the members of the task force to implement policies, both internally and externally, that benefit all Americans. One such proposed policy is the item in front of us now. I would like to thank the Bureau for its fine work on this notice. It is a positive both for consumers and industry. There is little question that consumers stand to benefit from having increased control over whether or not they may receive telephone solicitations at home. By proposing to require sellers and telemarketers to obtain prior written consent for pre-recorded calls, we are ensuring that consumers are making an affirmative choice to receive such calls. For industry, it is important in this area to have a uniform set of rules that makes compliance straightforward. While in some cases it may be preferential to permit a varied regulatory approach, in this case, it appears that continuity across jurisdictions is far more sensible. I look forward to reviewing the comments filed in this proceeding and working with my fellow commissioners to institute appropriate rules that enable consumers to prevent the receipt of unwanted calls. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Baker?
Ditto. I, too, just wanted I could stop, but I'm not going to. I, too, want to acknowledge that the Consumer Task Force is a great idea. We're thrilled to have Joel Guerin lead it. We're looking forward to the great service that you're going to bring to the Commission. It's really, obviously, very important. Nothing we do at the Commission is more important, really, than consider the impact of our actions and on each bureau and in each office and on Americans' consumers. So we look forward to your input. I think in my short time here at the Commission, we have already seen great improvements in that, and I thank the chairman for his efforts in that. I think bringing the public into our more accessibly into our activities is terrific, and the transparency that's coming into the FCC is really encouraging. And again, I just give great credit to the chairman for what he's doing and what we're putting on the record and being able to access it and having consumers see what we're doing, and it's just a great improvement. So kudos for that as well. I too am joining in the voices to please to support this in PRM. It's an important step towards policy changes that will give consumers greater control over the pre-recorded telemarketing calls that we receive, sometimes, again, at inconvenient times and annoying times, but they're intrusive. But at the same time, these proposed rules would include important exemptions, as mentioned, for calls initiated for emergency services and purposes of health care, related calls subject to HIPAA. I also think it's really good to harmonize rules where we can in the federal government and where the statute allows us to do so. So I think it's an important step that we're harmonizing our rules with the Federal Trade Commission. I have some questions about the proposal related to established business relationships, and so I look forward to the rulemaking on this and reviewing the record. So basically, thanks to CGB for this item.
Well, listen, thank you again, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, both for your comments on this item and for your vote of confidence in CGB, in this new task force, and in myself. We certainly do have our hands full, but we have our hands full, I think, with a number of great opportunities to improve things for consumers. This item is one step in that direction, and we're all looking forward to much more great work ahead. So thank you.
Thank you. And Joel, and thank you, and Mark, and Erica, and the consumer team. We expect a lot from the task force, from the consumer task force, not only smart and sensible policies that promote the interests of consumers, but we also expect it to lead to faster and more efficient decision-making agency-wide as issues are spotted earlier, worked into the process earlier so that they don't delay things at the end. We've spoken about that, and I'm looking forward to having you follow up on that. With respect to this item, I won't add to what my colleagues have said. What it boils down to is this is a proposal for an action that's consistent with broader themes that we've all been talking about, empowering consumers with common sense policies that seize the opportunities of new information technologies. So I'm pleased that we're moving forward with this. And I'm pleased also to acknowledge the role that the Federal Trade Commission has played. The FTC has displayed leadership here, and we learn from each other. It's an area where we have good interagency cooperation, and this is an example of it. So thanks to each of you. We appreciate it, and we're looking forward to moving on this proceeding quickly. Oh, we have to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And anyone opposed? No, this is adopted. And the Bureau's request for editorial privileges is granted. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the next item on your agenda will be presented by the Media Bureau. It is entitled Review of the Commission's Program Access Rules and Examination of Programming Tying Arrangements.
Thank you. So, Mr. Lake, this is not your first appearance before the Commission. You're now an old hand supported by a great team of people who've worked very hard on this complicated issue. So please go ahead.
It is not my first appearance. I'm very happy to be here again. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Media Bureau presents today a proposed report and order that we think will both facilitate competition in multi-channel video distribution and promote broadband deployment. When Congress enacted the Cable Act in 1992, it sought to encourage competition to incumbent cable operators. It knew that those operators owned a significant portion of the programming that they provide over their systems, and it was concerned that they might deny that programming to their new rivals, and thus make it difficult for those rivals to compete. Congress added Section 628 to the Communications Act to address that concern. One part of Section 628 flatly prohibits cable operators from entering into exclusive agreements with affiliated providers of satellite-delivered programming. Another, broader provision authorizes the Commission to prohibit unfair acts by cable operators that have the purpose or effect of preventing or significantly hindering competition in the distribution of satellite-delivered programming. The order we propose today will exercise the latter authority to address unfair acts relating to terrestrially delivered programming where those acts have the prohibited effect. The order will promote competition in video distribution by enabling rival distributors to get access to must-have programming that they cannot offer today to their consumers. Consumers will benefit because they will have more choices, and because video revenues are a key element of the business case for rolling out broadband. Greater video competition will mean more broadband deployment, one of the chief goals of the Commission's broadband initiative. Joining me at the table are Austin Schlick, the Commission's General Counsel, Nancy Murphy of the Media Bureau's front office, and Mary Beth Murphy, Stephen Brockhart, David Konzel, and Diana Sokolow of the Bureau's Policy Division. I would like to acknowledge also the assistance of Stuart Benjamin of the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Analysis, and Marilyn San and Susan Aaron in the Office of the General Counsel in preparing the item. Austin will present the legal analysis underlying today's proposed decision, and then David will describe the policy analysis of the decision and the chief provisions of the order. Thank you very much. Austin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Media Bureau and the Office of General Counsel have both looked very closely at the statutory provisions, case law, and Commission precedent underlying this item, and we've concluded that the report and order before you is consistent with all those sources of authority. The first and most important source of authority, of course, is Section 628, and specifically Section 628B of the Communications Act, which is the section of the Act that this item directly implements. Section 628B provides that it shall be unlawful for a cable operator or another of the covered entities to engage in unfair methods of competition or unfair or deceptive acts or practices, the purpose or effect of which is to hinder significantly or to prevent any multi-channel video programming distributor from providing satellite cable programming or satellite broadcast programming to subscribers or consumers. Other relevant provisions of the Act are Section 628C1, which provides the Commission general rulemaking authority to implement the prohibition of 628B. Section 628C2, which is a provision in which Congress mandated that the Commission, within the rules that it promulgates under 628C1 and to implement 628B, adopt certain, in the language of Congress, minimum contents. And those minimum contents address unfair practices that specifically relate to cable-affiliated programming that is delivered by satellite. Now, two important points about Section 628C2. The first is that it is limited to programming that's delivered by satellite rather than by terrestrial means such as fiber optic or coaxial delivery. But secondly, Congress in Section 628C2 made a judgment that those particular acts must be presumed to cause harm to competition, and therefore it's not necessary to undertake the competitive analysis that's required when implementing 628B itself. Finally, Section 628D, Congress recognized the distinction between Section 628B, the general provision, and the specific provision of 628C2, and provided that complainants could bring complaints under either B or the rules adopted by the Commission pursuant to congressional direction. Now, it's been argued by some in the cable industry that Section 628C2 and its mandate concerning minimum provisions of our regulations that go to satellite-delivered programming has the effect of occupying the field and prohibits the Commission from adopting rules concerning terrestrially delivered programming to implement 628B. And that's incorrect, we've determined, for several reasons. The first is that Congress itself made clear in the text of the statute that 628C2 mandates only minimum contents of the regulation and does not occupy the field. This very issue, secondly, was put to the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit just last year. In that case, the cable industry challenged the Commission's regulations, which prohibited exclusive contracts with MDU owners to prevent competing MVPDs from serving the buildings. And the cable industry argued that Congress in 628C2 made clear that its intent under Section 628 was to address satellite-delivered programming and only practices that directly involved the provision of that programming. The D.C. Circuit directly rejected that argument and explained that Congress's enumeration of specific required regulations in subsection C actually suggests that the Congress intended subsection B's generic language to cover a broader field, and it's that broader field that the Commission enters with the item today. The item is consistent with Commission precedent. The Commission, in fact, has held since 2000 and 2001 that moving satellite-delivered programming to terrestrial delivery violates Section 628B, and so recognized the broader scope of 628B. A final point is that the item before you gives effect to the congressional distinction between the mandatory contents in 628C2 and the broader prohibition in 628B. The item recognizes that in a complaint brought pursuant to 628B, the complainant must show harm to competition, which again Congress presumed with respect to satellite programming. So the item does not, as some have argued, simply extend the congressional minimum contents of 628C2, but rather directly implements all the requirements of 628B. With that general legal introduction, I'll turn the floor over to David Consul, who will discuss the policy rationale for the item before you.
Thank you, Austin, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The order finds 3 reasons for Commission action to address unfair acts involving terrestrially delivered cable-affiliated programming. First, consistent with the Commission's conclusion in the 2007 Program Access Order, the order finds that cable operators continue to have an incentive and ability to engage in unfair acts involving their affiliated programming. Second, this finding is supported by real-world evidence that vertically integrated cable operators have withheld their terrestrially delivered programming from their MVPD competitors. Examples in the record include the withholding of terrestrially delivered cable-affiliated regional sports networks in New York, Philadelphia, and San Diego. Moreover, the record reflects that terrestrial distribution is becoming more cost-effective and that its use is likely to continue and possibly increase in the future. Third, the order notes evidence that, in some cases, these unfair acts have significantly hindered MVPDs from providing satellite cable programming and satellite broadcast programming to subscribers or consumers. Specifically, in the 2006 Adelphia Order and again in the 2007 Program Access Order, the Commission found that the withholding of a terrestrially delivered cable-affiliated regional sports network from DBS operators in San Diego and Philadelphia caused the percentage of television households subscribing to DBS operators in those markets to be 33% lower and 40% lower, respectively, than what it otherwise would have been. The order adopts rules permitting complainants to allege 3 types of unfair acts involving terrestrially delivered cable-affiliated programming: exclusive contracts, discrimination, and undue influence. The order notes that Congress has already established that these are unfair acts for purposes of Section 628B by including them in the list of acts the Commission must regulate under Section 628C2 with respect to satellite-delivered programming. In addition, the order finds that these practices satisfy the definition of the term unfair act previously adopted by the Commission in the MDU order. As required by Section 628B, a program access complainant alleging one or more of these unfair acts involving terrestrially delivered cable-affiliated programming will have the burden of proving that the unfair act has the purpose or effect of significantly hindering or preventing the MVPD from providing satellite cable programming or satellite broadcast programming. The order notes that it is highly unlikely that a complainant alleging an unfair act involving local news and local community or educational programming will satisfy this burden due to the replicable nature of this type of programming. Based both on Commission precedent and record evidence in this proceeding, however, the order finds that regional sports networks are very likely to be both non-replicable and highly valued by consumers. Accordingly, in a program access complaint alleging an unfair act involving a terrestrially delivered cable-affiliated regional sports network, the order provides that the complainant may invoke a rebuttable presumption that the unfair act has the purpose or effect set forth in Section 628B. In addition, in light of the distinctive characteristics of high-definition programming and the preference of consumers for such programming, the order concludes that the HD version of a network will be analyzed separately from the standard definition version of the same network. Thus, the fact that a complainant offers the SD version of a network to subscribers will not alone be sufficient to refute the complainant's showing that lack of access to the HD version has the purpose or effect set forth in Section 628B. Similarly, in the case of a regional sports network, the fact that a complainant offers the SD version of the regional sports network to subscribers will not alone be sufficient to rebut the presumption that lack of access to the HD version has the purpose or effect set forth in Section 628B. The order does not adopt specific evidentiary requirements with respect to proof that the defendant's alleged activities have the purpose or effect set forth in Section 628B. Rather, the evidence required to satisfy this burden will vary based on the facts and circumstances of each case. Examples of evidence that might be provided include an appropriately crafted regression analysis or statistically reliable survey data. The order recognizes, however, that not all potential complainants will have the resources to perform a regression analysis or market survey. The order notes that the reliability of the empirical data provided in each proceeding will be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Complainants alleging discrimination, as opposed to an exclusive contract or undue influence, will be required to meet an additional burden. Section 628B requires the Commission to address the unfair acts of three types of entities: cable operators, satellite cable programming vendors in which a cable operator has an attributable interest, and satellite broadcast programmers. This list does not include the unfair acts of other programming vendors delivering programming only by terrestrial means. Accordingly, in a program access complaint alleging that a cable-affiliated programmer that provides terrestrially delivering programming has discriminated against an MVPD, the complainant will have the additional burden of proof that the programmer that is alleged to have engaged in discrimination is wholly owned by, controlled by, or under common control with one of the entities covered by Section 628B. The order provides that in all program access cases involving terrestrially delivered cable-affiliated programming, the defendant will have 45 days, rather than the usual 20 days, to file an answer to the complaint to ensure that the defendant has adequate time to develop a full case-specific response. This additional time reflects that program access complaints involving terrestrially delivered programming, unlike complaints involving satellite-delivered programming, entail an additional factual inquiry regarding whether the unfair act has the purpose or effect set forth in Section 628B. As required by the Communications Act, the new rules will apply not only to cable operators and the other entities specifically covered by Section 628B, but also to common carriers and open video systems and their affiliated programmers to the extent that these entities provide video programming to subscribers or consumers. The new rules will apply to existing contracts. Although a cable operator may have entered into an exclusive contract prior to the effective date of the rules adopted in this order, an MVPD may file a program access complaint after the effective date of the rules, alleging that the cable operator's continued reliance on or enforcement of this contract violates these rules. The new rules will not apply, however, to the unfair acts of cable operators that preceded the effective date of these rules. With respect to pending program access complaints alleging unfair acts involving terrestrially delivered cable-affiliated programming, complainants may continue to prosecute these complaints pursuant to Section 628D of the Communications Act. In addition, a complainant that wants a currently pending complaint considered under the new rules can submit a supplemental filing alleging that the defendant has engaged in an unfair act after the effective date of the rules. Pursuant to merger conditions adopted in the Adelphia Order, certain terrestrially delivered regional sports networks affiliated with Comcast or Time Warner Cable are currently required to comply with the program access rules applicable to satellite-delivered cable-affiliated programming. The new rules do not trigger modification of these conditions. One regional sports network, Comcast Sportsnet Philadelphia, is exempt from these conditions to the extent that it was not available to an MVPD at the time of the Adelphia Order. Pursuant to the rules adopted in the order, however, an MVPD that did not have access to Comcast Sportsnet Philadelphia at the time of the Adelphia Order may file a program access complaint alleging an unfair act involving that network. Finally, the order establishes procedures for the Commission's consideration of requests for a temporary standstill of the price, terms, and other conditions of an existing programming contract by a program access complainant seeking renewal of such a contract. This standstill process will apply to all program access complaints, regardless of whether the programming at issue is satellite delivered or terrestrially delivered. A complainant must file a petition seeking Commission approval for the standstill and demonstrate how grant of the standstill will meet the following 4 criteria. First, that the complainant is likely to prevail on the merits of its complaint. Second, that the complainant will suffer irreparable harm absent a stay. Third, that grant of a stay will not substantially harm other interested parties. And fourth, that the public interest favors grant of a stay. A defendant will have an opportunity to respond to the petition for a standstill. If granted, the temporary standstill will ensure that consumers continue to receive programming pending resolution of a program access complaint. The Media Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt the report in order. The Bureau also requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We know how hard you've all worked together on this. Commissioner Copps?
Thank you. Drilled down to its core, the purpose of this item is to minimize unfair behavior in such a way to benefit consumers through more competition. When it comes to competition and diversity in video programming distribution, it is essential for the FCC to determine how unfair behavior shortchanges consumers by stifling competition. I believe the program access order before us today can go a long way toward giving consumers the benefits of some additional competition. Congress gave us more than adequate authority, as Austin has cogently and I think altogether persuasively demonstrated, in Section 628 of the Communications Act to prohibit unfair acts by cable operators that significantly hinder or prevent competitors from providing programming to consumers. The record developed in response to the Commission's notice of proposed rulemaking looked at whether to extend the program access rules to terrestrially delivered programming. That record makes clear that lack of program access is a serious concern precisely because it limits competition. That hurts competitors, of course. That hurts consumers. Today's action by the Commission addresses these concerns in what I believe is a balanced and consumer-friendly way. The item deals in a significant way with the regional sports networks that have been used as a wedge by companies to deny non-replicable programming to interested consumers. With the advent of HD, the sports viewing experience and the expectations for that experience have changed. This is must-have programming in standard definition. It is also must-have programming in high definition. Today, we determine for good reasons that withholding such an HD feed is withholding a separate channel, even where a standard definition version of the network is available. A more difficult issue is how to treat news programming. It will come as no surprise to anyone that I consider news to be critically important programming. Getting it from a diversity of sources is what enhances our civic dialogue, so the scales tip, in my mind, against mandating access to one local news show and in favor of incentivizing the production of diverse news programming. That's what localism and diversity are really all about. Today's order adopts rules for complainants to pursue program access complaints and addresses the fact that some players in these disputes will be larger and more powerful than others, and that it is imperative to have a process that is reasonably accessible and affordable to all. For this reason, I am very pleased that language is included to indicate that varying scales of factual evidence and not just time-consuming and expensive analyses can be the basis for a showing of harm by potential complainants. By the same token, the inclusion of a standstill to continue service during disputes, along with the inclusion of good faith language, was very important, should assist in preventing the process from being unduly lengthy and expensive. Protracted, expensive, and unnecessary procedures too often translate into consumer harm. I thank the chairman and colleagues for working with us to more fully realize the potential of the draft order. This item has been awaiting action for years. And today, thanks to the chairman's leadership, it's action that we get, and it's good action, too. I want to thank the Media Bureau, everybody at the table there, and those down at the table who worked so hard on this, the Office of General Counsel, for all of their extraordinary efforts to address the challenging and often very deep in the weeds issues that are related to program access in a way that I think really will ultimately benefit consumers. So thank you very much, and I will be pleased to support the item.
Thank you, Commissioner Copps. Commissioner McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And perhaps Austin and I, it's a pity we can't get CLE credit for previewing what's to be a likely appellate oral argument later, but I won't be arguing that one. So, but in any case, I do have a more complete statement for the record, Mr. Chairman, which I hope will be included. But in the interest of brevity, because we still have a lot of a meeting ahead of us, I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. So, Sometimes life hands us moments where we would like to follow our friends and colleagues and share in the spirit of their collective actions. Yet, at other times, as much as we would like to venture with them, we know that we should not for many good reasons. In this case, I share many of the general policy goals of today's order, namely promoting competition in the video marketplace. In fact, I'm already on record in supporting many FCC initiatives designed to do just that. Not only does more competition in video give consumers more choices, more powerful innovations, and lower prices, but it helps spur greater demand for and deployment of broadband facilities as well. Among the efforts I've supported over the years are the Commission's Video Franchising Reform Order, the Inside Wiring Order, the Program Access Extension Order, and the Multiple Dwelling Unit Access Order, the MDU Order. In each of those proceedings, the Commission was acting well within its statutory authority. Even more to the point, I supported merger conditions in the 2006 Adelphia transaction concerning regional sports networks, RSNs, that programming, because I recognize that the unavailability of RSNs can impair competition in certain circumstances. The Commission's action there, however, was based on the agency's broad merger review authority, not its more limited powers under Section 628. Unfortunately, today's order is clearly beyond our statutory reach. As a consequence, I respectfully, very respectfully, dissent. My colleagues and the Commission staff have worked hard to create a basis for the extension of authority here. Nevertheless, I'm not persuaded that the language and structure of the statute adequately support the actions taken. Section 628 refers to satellite-delivered programming 36 times throughout the length of the provision, including 14 references in the subsections most at issue here. The plain language of Section 628 bars the FCC from establishing rules governing disputes involving terrestrially delivered programming, whether we like that outcome or not. To paraphrase Justice Kennedy in a different kind of case, the hard fact is that sometimes we must make decisions we do not like. We make them because they are right in the sense that the law, as we see it, compels the result, end quote. Additionally, I'm not convinced that the recent decision of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit in NCTA versus FCC, which upheld the Commission's MDU access order, which again I supported, supports as broad a reading of the statute as that adopted by the majority here. Although the court in NCTA spoke of Section 628's broad and sweeping terms, it also included a cautionary note about so broadly employing the provision in other settings that the action would raise the, quote, specter of a statutory grant without bounds, end quote. Specifically, the D.C. Circuit warned just 7 months ago that, quote, in prescribing an overbroad set of practices within the statutorily identified effect, an agency might stray so far from the paradigm case as to render its interpretation unreasonable, arbitrary, or capricious, end quote. I'm concerned that the order here, the first Commission rulemaking action taken under Section 628 since the NCTA decision, does just that. In short, the FCC is not Congress. We cannot rewrite statutes. In fact, for nearly 18 years, until today, many legal experts on both sides of this debate found consensus in the opinion that the Commission's Program Access Authority was limited to programming delivered to cable head-ends by satellite due to an explicit congressional carve-out restricting our ability to regulate terrestrially delivered programming. Before today, that congressional restriction was largely considered to be clear and unambiguous. Nonetheless, the majority departs from that long-held belief and now concludes that the statutory language is ambiguous. Obviously, the majority feels as though it must reverse Commission precedent and craft new arguments in order to claim the legal protections of Chevron deference in its interpretation of Section 628. In contrast, I find the meaning of the statute to be quite plain, and therefore I see a number of weaknesses in the order's statutory analysis. First, the order conflicts with the language of Section 628B in a way that the Commission's MDU access order simply did not. Second, the order glosses over a conflict between Section 628B and Section 628C2 that was not directly implicated in the Commission's MDU access proceeding. While I agree that the language and structure of Section 628 supports Commission action in a broader field in areas beyond those enumerated in subsection C, I cannot find that Section 628B allows the Commission to take action in conflict with the paradigm case established by Section 628C2. That the objective is meritorious as a policy matter cannot trump the statutory constraints on the FCC's authority, no matter how earnestly we may want to operate as a roving commission going about doing good, to quote Judge Sintel's recent admonition. My full written statement offers more detail regarding my concerns, but in the interest of brevity, I'll leave it at that today, although I do have one other wish. As I've stated many times over the years, and I just praised in the earlier NPRM, offering the proposed texts of new rules for public comment would better inform our deliberations and make our proceedings more transparent to the American public, and I think we all could have benefited from that here. But I thank the Commission's hardworking staff for their efforts on this order and their willingness to engage in open, frank, and friendly conversations and debate with me about this legal analysis. I look forward to considering future proposals to advance competition and spur broadband deployment that does not conflict with the express provisions of the Communications Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. Today's order is a very positive development for American consumers. In enacting Section 628, Congress sought to increase competition and diversity in the multi-channel video programming market and to spur the development of communications technologies. By developing a mechanism through which competitors can gain access to programming that has been unfairly withheld, we hopefully will put an end to a practice that undermines our congressional mandate. It makes little sense in today's market to have two wholly distinct rules for satellite and terrestrially delivered programming. There is nothing inherent in either mode of delivery that ensures that there will be adequate competition in the MVPD market. Indeed, most consumers have no idea by what means any particular network is delivered. What they do understand, however, is which providers actually carry the programming they most desire. The result is that those operators who do not have access to critical programming may fail to produce the meaningful competition and diversity envisioned by Congress. As the order itself notes, the best example of the problem we address today is the practice of withholding access to regional sports networks. There is no secret why vertically integrated operators would choose to withhold such programming. It is a make-or-break proposition for many consumers. They simply would not switch to a competitor who does not offer that programming. In my view, not only do these actions severely limit competition, including the opportunities of new entrants, but they also can serve as a way in which an MVPD can gain a stranglehold on the market without having to innovate in other ways that meet consumer demands. So instead of lowering prices, improving customer service, or generating new and diverse programming due to competitive pressure, an operator can simply withhold access to important programming it owns in some form or fashion and watch its competitors scramble to stay afloat. The bottom line is this. Under our prior regime, consumers were caught in the crosshairs and have been the ultimate losers in an unfortunate battle among MVPD competitors. Section 628 aims to eliminate such a result, and I am pleased that we have developed a thoughtful approach to this chronic problem. I thank both the Media Bureau and the Office of General Counsel for their fantastic work on this item. You approach this order with an open mind, and therefore we are able to make some important improvements to it as the process unfolded. Your work has been exemplary. The result is a reflection of your expertise and commitment to ensuring competition that will benefit the American people, and I thank you.
Commissioner Clyburn, thank you. Commissioner Baker?
Okay. I would like to thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank each one of my fellow commissioners for the lively discussion we've had with this, and especially to the Media Bureau and to the General Counsel. These issues have troubled consumers and multi-channel video programming distributors alike for years. So I'm very pleased to support a well-reasoned, legally sound, and narrowly tailored order that effectively considers both legal precedent and policy concerns. At the outset, I would like to reiterate my belief that a competitive marketplace serves the public interest. The issue before the Commission, framed by the purpose of Section 628, stems from congressional intent to promote the public interest, convenience, and necessity by increasing competition and diversity in the video programming market. That clear purpose guided me towards an outcome that maximizes the potential for innovation-driven competition. Regulation must, however, be accomplished with statutory authority, and rules of general applicability must be adopted via rulemaking. I am pleased that we are addressing this issue in a rulemaking proceeding rather than through the narrow lens of a specific adjudication such as a merger. Equally important is our decision to limit this rulemaking to vertically integrated video providers. Our action today demonstrates the value of collaboration to create judicious, balanced, and enforceable regulation. I appreciate the concerns regarding statutory construction and do not take them lightly. Section 628 prohibits certain behavior regarding satellite-delivered programming, but does not specifically address terrestrial-delivered programming. Some have argued that this disparity accounts for and justifies the so-called terrestrial exemption, but I read the statute in a different light. Section 628 provides authority to promulgate rules beyond those minimum contents of regulation specified in Section 628C2. This is consistent with the Commission's position in the MDU order and the D.C. Circuit Court in its decision to uphold that order. The Circuit Court stated that 628B should be given broad sweeping application, thus affirming our authority to adopt rules prohibiting behavior not expressly mentioned within 628 when such regulation is consistent with the intention of the statute. Important policy considerations merit the action in this order. Terrestrial means have been increasingly relied upon to deliver programming. Although not necessarily undertaken for anti-competitive reasons, terrestrial distribution has, in some cases, limited the ability of MVPDs and consumers to access popular, non-replicable programming. It is particularly significant to me that this order is narrowly tailored. As the order explains, the record contains no evidence to suggest that most terrestrial delivered programming has the purpose or effect of significantly hindering or preventing MVPDs from providing satellite cable programming or satellite broadcast programming. As the order points out, terrestrial distribution of local news and similar local programming is unlikely to qualify as prescribed conduct under Section 627. We have adopted specific standstill procedures that only apply to program access complaints. These determinations, along with our effort to distinguish replicable and non-replicable programming, serve to encourage innovation, investment, and competition generally. Our decision to utilize a case-by-case approach and an extended answer period allows for balanced adjudications. I'm optimistic that these procedures will provide for consideration of a nuanced, particularized scenarios that may exist or may develop. The 1992 Program Access Rules were designed to foster competition, a force that, in my mind, best regulates the marketplace. It is my hope and expectation that this order will complement those rules to enhance competition and better serve consumers.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Today, the Commission takes an important step to promote competition, empower consumers, and foster innovation by closing a loophole in our program access rules. The loophole gives free rein to multi-channel TV providers to lock up local sports events and other popular programming and withhold them from rival providers. Locking up a much-loved local sports franchise could be game, set, match for video competition. consumers who want to switch video providers shouldn't have to give up their favorite team in the process. Today, the Commission levels the competitive playing field and does so in a way that promotes innovation and investment in new programming, like local news, and includes a fair process for adjudicating disputes. Today's order flows directly from both the governing statute, the record in this proceeding, as well as the steps that Congress and the Commission have taken to promote competition in the delivery of video programming. As a result of policies implemented over the last years, consumers can increasingly choose their video service provider among cable, DBS, and telephone company providers. Competition is, as we've heard, the mother of innovation and investment and the core way that we advance consumer interests. As Congress recognized in the Cable Act of 1992, for competition to remain vibrant, cable operators must not unjustly deny competitors access to must-have programming. As we've heard, Commission rules implementing the Cable Act prohibited cable operators from using their control of the satellite-delivered programming that they own to harm competitors. At the time the rules were adopted, there was no need for the Commission in implementing the statute to look beyond the satellite-delivered programming to promote competition. However, over the years since the rules were first adopted, technological developments have made it increasingly cost-effective for content providers to deliver their programming, including local and regional content, through fiber optic or other non-satellite means. And so what was originally an immaterial part of our rules became a major loophole in our video competition framework. To promote competition, viewers should not be unfairly forced to choose between the sports teams they love and the provider they prefer. And so today's action represents a major step toward realizing the promise of a competitive marketplace for video services while also supporting innovation in the video marketplace. Our new rules are structured to preserve incentives for cable operators to develop innovative programming such as local news networks. The new rules also create a fair process for the Commission to adjudicate claims. During the course of this proceeding, we received extremely helpful input from my fellow commissioners, and the suggestions are reflected in a strong and balanced order. I'm grateful to my colleagues. I'm grateful to our Media Bureau and the General Counsel's Office for their excellent work in studying the law, the economics, and the needs of consumers, and developing common sense, fair-minded rules to promote competition and innovation. And again, I'm grateful to my colleagues on the Commission who have improved the outcome today through their active engagement in the development of this order. So with that, let's move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it, so ordered. The Bureau's request for editorial privileges is granted. And again, thank you much for working very hard on this excellent work, and much appreciated. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on our agenda.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, the final item on your agenda today will be a report on the status of the National Broadband Plan.
Thank you. There's an old saying that if you can finish your life's work in your own lifetime, then you're not thinking big enough. Recent developments have shown that the broadband team is thinking big enough. The broadband team is working around the clock on the National Broadband Plan, a massive task. I'm continually impressed by the dedication, the energy, and the focus they've brought to this important project. Today we're going to hear from Phoebe Yang, a key member of the broadband team who has been with us now for several months as Chief Counsel and Senior Advisor to the Omnibus Broadband Initiative, and has been working mostly behind the scenes until now. As a reward or punishment, Phoebe Yang will be handling the presentation today. Let me say that Phoebe Yang has an extraordinary background. She was editor-in-chief of the Stanford Law Review, served as a special coordinator for China rule of law at the State Department under Presidents Clinton and George W. Bush, and worked as vice president of international strategy and policy for the newly merged AOL Time Warner, newly merged when you worked for them. And she is yet another example of the high caliber people who have chosen to devote their time to public service and to this important project of creating our first National Broadband Plan. Phoebe Yang, we are delighted that you are part of the effort and look forward to your report today on the status of the broadband plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioner Clyburn, Copps, McDowell, and Baker. It's a privilege to be here with you today, and particularly to take a brief pause from the work that we're doing to give you an update on where things are and what we're busy working on. The team is working very hard to deliver on our goal to make the National Broadband Plan proceeding as open and transparent and data-driven as possible so that we can incorporate the best ideas from the breadth of the communities that are affected. And the team is indeed writing even as we speak. We have taken the opportunity to extend the reply comment period to give the public full opportunity to respond to any additional comments that have been placed into the record for the plan. We've also issued another and hopefully final public notice on the personal data issue, and those comments are due on January 22nd, and we're making a last call for comments to come in hopefully by January 27th. The team is busy sorting through and reviewing the very extensive record, including ex parte filings, comments, reply comments, blog entries, workshop follow-up items, and as of last night at 7 p.m., the current record stands at no less than 69,002 pages with 31 public notices. The public notice comments alone constitute 10,525 pages from 799 comments. There are over 1,500 proposals and thousands of recommendations that have been made in the record. And we also have the privilege of having a new media component to this with 98 blog posts and 817 comments, which are all in the record as well. The schedule going forward is, as you know, we'll be beginning briefings to the Commissioner's legal advisors next week. We are working very closely with the Bureau and office chiefs to make sure that this is an actionable plan. The work will not end on March 17th, and we're very aware of that, and we want to make sure that we set concrete goals there as well. And the February Commission meeting will focus on a briefing for you on national purposes, which Kristen Kane, whom you know, will present. I thought I would also take the opportunity to give you a brief outline of what the plan will look like, in addition to the mission, goals, and vision, as well as a look at the current state of broadband in the American economy and system. We will also have sections relating to inclusion. What we've called inclusion involves both USF as well as adoption and other special issues that we think are very important, for example, how to address connectivity in the tribal communities, as well as BTOP. We will also be looking at, in a broad sense, innovation and investment and how to address the different aspects of the ecosystem, from applications and devices and networks to spur innovation and investment, covering areas such as research and development, consumer protection and transparency, lowering input costs, and spectrum, of course, backhaul and middle mile, set-top box issues, as well as how to leverage government and personal data for the benefit of the public. We will, as you know, also be addressing the range of national purposes from healthcare, education, energy, economic opportunity, civic engagement, public safety, and government performance. And we will also be outlining directionally how the Commission might undertake the implementation. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and look forward to working with you and your staffs going forward. And with your permission, I'll return to work.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Copps?
Well, I'd just say we're pleased that the work continues. I'm also pleased at the level of understanding that greeted the request for a month's more time. I think it was a reasonable request, but a good, positive reaction, and I am sure the broadband team will make good use of it as it puts together its recommendations. You can tell, Blair, our expectations grow by the day. I do want to express my thanks, though, to the many, many people who are working on the broadband plan here at the Commission. You know, their holidays and their weekends aren't what they used to be, and I know that, and we all know that, but we're very, very grateful for the commitment they bring to one of the greatest challenges that the Commission has ever undertaken, and we are looking forward to viewing the results of this proceeding.
Thank you. Commissioner McDowell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to reiterate my thanks to the broadband team and everyone who's working so hard and giving up weekends and holidays and evenings and all sorts of other personal time to work on it. To quote a fresh quote right from my cops, our expectations do grow by the day, and now that we have some extra time, I do look forward to receiving the draft proposal so that we as commissioners can start looking at it more in depth. You've been terrific in terms of absorbing information, but now we would like to see what it is you're thinking in more detail. And so as soon as we can get that process underway, that'll be all for the better.
Yes,
thank you.
We agree, and we're looking forward to starting that next week. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Knowing that I didn't have an opportunity to properly greet our international guests, and if I knew they were here before they walked out, I would have said, ni hao.
Ni hao.
One of the opportunities that I had, if I could take a couple of moments, a few years ago was to visit China. And that was not a social visit. Part of that was in keeping with what we are tasked as it relates to your job, Phoebe. My grandmother's name was Phoebe, so I'll take a personal privilege on that also. That we spent a total of 3 days in one of the most rural sections of China. I think it was the Hebei, help me with that province, but subject to check, as you lawyers like to say. And in habitat style, we built a computer lab with the help of a major company and local workers. I think about 100 or so persons from that entity in a congressional delegation, and if you can believe me, doing quality control and a little bit of painting. If you can believe that, I was out there. We transformed a very rural community forever. At that dedication, I know the entire village came out because they knew that the power of high-speed internet access would forever change their lives and connect them to the world. I am pleased with the work you're doing. I am pleased that you had an extra 30 days to get it right, because I know you will. And I saw with that visit some years ago the importance and significance of a coordinated effort, the power that if all of us come together and recognize how technology can enhance communities, I mean, this sky's the limit. So again, Phoebe, thank you and your team for your efforts. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Commissioner Baker?
I agree with my colleagues. I want to commend you for all the hard work that you've done and all the amount of time. The data-driven process has been extraordinary. The FCC's never seen anything quite like it. So I really think the effort's been extraordinary. Looking forward to the document, looking forward to moving from the plan phase to the action phase. So we'll look forward to the next steps.
Thank you very much. And to echo my colleagues, we really do appreciate the work that you've put in, your colleagues working on this task of utmost importance for our kids, our communities, our global competitiveness. We will let you get back to work. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate the hard work of the entire team. And so you're free to go. We're gonna wrap up the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Here, I think before we adjourn, do any of my colleagues have any personnel or other announcements today? Nothing, Commissioner Clyburn?
Sorry, I'm taking up a lot of time today. But Mr. Chairman and colleagues, I'd like to introduce our spring interns, if you will allow me to. We have 3 interns that have joined our office. Kevin Ryan, if you would stand. Oh, there he is. My eyes are giving, my contacts are not working today. Is a third-year law student at the Columbus I'm from Columbia, so forget that. The Columbus School of Law at Catholic University. With all of his free time, Kevin is an editor-in-chief of the Journal of Communications Law and Policy. Prior to joining our office, Kevin served as a legal intern both with the House Subcommittee on Communications Technology and the Internet and NTIA. Welcome, Kevin. Christina Harper is a first-year graduate student at the John H. Johnson School of Communications at Howard University. Christina has previously worked with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and as a public relations intern with Clark and Associates. Welcome. And last but not least, though she is not with us this afternoon now, is a third-year law student at George Washington University Law School, Devorah Walensky. Devorah just completed an internship with the Media Bureau and previously interned with the Wireline Competition Bureau here at the agency. She has also served as a judicial extern with the Appellate Court of Illinois. I want to welcome these bright young individuals to my office, and I know you will join me in welcoming them to the FCC. Lastly, I want to give heartfelt thanks to Carol Simpson, who helped me get my office up and running as my interim wireline advisor. We will miss her concise, level-headed counsel, as well as the quick wit she brought to my office. WCB is lucky to have her back as Deputy Chief of the Competition Policy Division. Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Clyburn, thank you. Commissioner Baker, any announcements? Just a couple. First, on a somber note, I'd like to honor the memories of 3 FCC family members who recently passed away. First, Rosalind Singleton, who died just at the end of 2009 following a courageous battle with pancreatic cancer. Of her more than 46 years of public service, Ross spent her last 10 years at the FCC, always smiling. She'll be remembered as a good friend to so many here, a superb writer, a skilled negotiator, and a lifelong mentor to her coworkers. Next, and I'm sorry there's more than one, Jackie Coles was an innovative, creative, energetic, deep-thinking problem solver who was always looking forward to the next opportunity to improve herself and the world around her. During her 7 years as Associate Secretary for Agenda and Publications, she designed databases, created checklists, drafted handbooks, and streamlined the entire agenda and publication process. Jackie's keen intellect and giving spirit will be missed by so many. And very recently, we learned of the passing of Helen McLean, who worked in our Media Bureau. To the families of each of these former staff members, we honor the memories of our friends and employees. We're grateful for their service, and our thoughts are with you. And last, I want to announce that the Commission exceeded our goals for this year's combined federal campaign. We broke all past records and exceeded our stretch goal by over $50,000, with donations still coming in. Let me thank each and every employee who gave. We had an extraordinary turnout among our staff for this important program. We appreciate it. We thank Steve Van Rokel, our managing director, for, again, working his special magic to exceed what we thought possible, and Dan Daly, who worked very hard coordinating this extraordinarily successful campaign, as well as the Bureau and office key workers for their efforts in making this happen. And with that, Madam Secretary, please announce the date of the next FCC meeting.
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, February 11th, 2010.
Thank you very much. Until then, we stand adjourned. everyone. Good morning, afternoon. What time is it? Wait, I know. 1:45. Jen?
All right. Who has the first question? All right, David.
Mr. Chairman, the FCC has said repeatedly for months that the National Broadband Plan would be delivered on time, that you folks were going to meet the February 17th statutory deadline. What changed, and what are the reasons for the 1-month delay?
Well, I'm not sure if there's much to add to what's been said. The team, as you know, has been working incredibly hard. The record in the proceeding is just immense, given the scope of the challenge. I think you heard some data today from Phoebe Yang. And the team looked at it and said that the benefits of a short postponement would be very significant, and I was happy to support them.
Could I just follow up and ask, at what point did you realize that the FCC was not on track to meet the deadline?
Do you know, I don't remember the exact chronology, but everything moves very quickly, and we can get back to you with a chronology if that's important.
But the proceeding has been immense all along. What is there something that changed that forced the FCC to have to announce the postponement?
It's a fast-moving proceeding. Listen, I encourage you to talk to the team to understand more deeply. You know, the bottom line for me is we want to meet the challenge of the responsibility that was entrusted to the FCC. There's a huge record. How many thousands of suggestions and recommendations did we hear about today? And as I said, the broadband team believed that a 30-day postponement would have real benefits in terms of the final product. And as I said, I'm more than happy to support that.
All right, Lynn?
Ms. Yang said that they would begin briefings next week of the commissioners. What kind of detail can the commissioners expect from those briefings? Will they actually be getting a look into what the plan will be recommending, and do you expect to let them vote on the final document?
Well, substantively, the briefings next week, on top of the briefings that have already happened, are part of an effort to have all of us roll up our sleeves and get smarter and smarter about these incredibly complex issues. With respect to exactly what the mechanism will be finally, we're talking among ourselves at the Commission on finding the right way, the best way to move forward. It doesn't fit into any boxes that we've previously had, and we're talking among ourselves and with the broadband team to determine the best way to proceed.
Okay,
Johnny? Another timing question. Can you commit, not having an application before you yet, but can you commit to 180-day or less review of Comcast NBC, and then in general of any merger that might come before the Commission?
You know, we don't have an application before us. We will work to as expeditiously as possible, as fairly as possible, to deal with that transaction once it's filed with us. But we haven't set out a timetable at this point.
Yeah, I had a question. I've heard there's a lot of discussions, or there have been some discussions inside the building about whether to reclassify broadband as a Title II service, both for USF and general purposes as part of the National Broadband Plan, or like at least that it will raise that question. And I'm just wondering, is there anything you can say about that today?
No, other than, you know, we have ample authority under the Communications Act. We're in various areas playing the cards that we were dealt. They're not necessarily the cards that we would have dealt ourselves. And the focus we have is on what we can do to promote the objectives of the Communications Act, for example, promoting competition, empowering consumers, making sure that broadband reaches rural America. And those are the goals that we're focused on, and obviously we'll make sure that whatever we do is lawful, consistent with the statute, and upholdable in court.
So just to follow up, I mean, I'm not sure. So it's possible that you will be looking at classification issues, or I mean, I just was hoping for something a little more concrete than that.
There's nothing to say. We're in a world of hypotheticals, and we have, as you saw today, just a fantastic team in our general counsel's office. They work very closely with the broadband team and with everyone else at the commission to deal with the legal elements of policy issues. And, I trust the team to dig through the legal issues to make sure that we're acting within our authority and that we have the ability to promote the core objectives of the Communications Act.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As you know, Secretary Clinton is speaking tomorrow on an open internet. What are your thoughts on what an open internet should be on a global scale, especially in light of the news reports about the hacking of Google's networks? And are you concerned about the hacking?
Of course. And, the FCC has been involved for many years together with the State Department, the U.S. Trade Rep, the Commerce Department on fighting for open markets, open competition around the globe, and those are still our policies.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Todd Shields, Bloomberg News. Spectrum questions. What do you expect out of the spectrum bill that's about to begin moving through Congress? And are you going to take away spectrum from the broadcasters?
First, on the spectrum bill, we're very pleased to see Congress moving forward. I think one of the clear issues that's come out of the broadband process, as you've all seen and as we've spoken about before, is the importance of mobile broadband to our global competitiveness as a country and the looming crisis on the horizon with respect to spectrum. And so all of these efforts relate to each other. They're all focused on making sure that we have the right medium and long-term strategic plan for our country with respect to spectrum. You've heard it on a bipartisan basis from the Commission. You're hearing it on a bipartisan basis from the Hill. This is a national competitiveness issue, and it's the kind of issue where we need everyone involved to be a part of the discussions, because there's a lot at stake for the country in terms of our global competitiveness and having our spectrum reach the opportunity for its people in terms of job creation, innovation, competition.
And the broadcasters, do they have anything to fear here?
Well, I think, to me, there are opportunities here for win-wins. I think you heard from the broadband team that the issue that's on the table is not at all shutting down broadcasters, but looking at spectrum efficiency and seeing what a sensible spectrum policy is for the country. There's been data submitted to the record about the unlocked value in that spectrum. To me, that creates an opportunity for a win-win for the country, and that's what we're focused on.
Paul Barbiello, Representative Boucher has made USF a priority for 2010, and he has said that he would rather Congress tackle USF and the FCC to tackle ICC reform. What type of, can you shine any light on the discussions going on right now, how the FCC and Congress will be working together toward USF?
We're very supportive of Chairman Boucher's efforts to tackle USF. We agree that the USF program has real challenges, that those challenges need to be tackled, that the program needs to be updated to apply to 21st century technologies and broadband. Our job is to be a resource to him and to the committee as they do their work, and meanwhile to make sure that we're tackling appropriately the issues within our jurisdiction. And so we're working very well with him, with the members of the committee as a resource, and I think it's based on a widespread agreement that the challenges of USF and intercarrier comp need to be addressed for us to deliver as a country on the opportunities of communications infrastructure.
I'm Kamala from Communications Daily. Chairman, in reference to the robocalls, can you tell me what the immediate next step is that the FCC is taking to make those revisions?
Well, we issued today a notice of proposed rulemaking. I don't know what the comment timetable is, but that's information that we'd be more than happy to get you. And my hope is that it can be a reasonably fast proceeding because there's been a lot of work done at the Federal Trade Commission on this. You know, the primary goal, you heard this from all the commissioners, is to empower consumers, give consumers more control over their communication services, what happens in their homes. So I'm hopeful that this can be a fast proceeding, but the next step will be the comment cycle. The Bureau will do its work, and and technically the next step will be moving to a report and order, assuming there are no new issues that are raised over the course of the proceeding.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Just one final question. Are you trying to broker a compromise on net neutrality, and if so, what might that look like?
Well, I'm saying to everyone that it's in the country's interest to find common ground on this issue so that we're promoting innovation, we're promoting investment in our infrastructure, and we're protecting the free flow of information. I think we share common goals as a country on this. I was pleased to see in the comments that were filed the common ground growing. I think that's a healthy thing. I was pleased to see companies like Google and Verizon get together to offer a constructive joint filing. These are positive indications that our process is bringing people together to focus on the very important long-term policy issues that are raised by this essential infrastructure.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll now proceed with the Bureau items, and we'll start in the order of which we took them up. So the Consumer Bureau with the TCPA and Joel Guerin and his team will start. Are there any questions on this item, by the way? Anybody going to have any items on the CGB? Okay. Joel, thank you very much. We'll then proceed to the Media Bureau, Bill Lake, and the terrestrial item. Are there questions on that? Oh, okay, all right. Are you? What? Oh. David is going to take the lead on it. Go ahead, Jonathan. Why don't you start?
Okay. David, quick follow-up.
Can you pull the mic up?
Sure.
Thank you.
David, I just want to make sure I understand what you said regarding rebuttable presumptions and HD and SD programming. It sounds like you're saying that it is not a rebuttable presumption for someone facing a complaint that they already carry the SD stream of any programming or only RSN programming.
We're treating HD and SD services as distinct services. So if you're talking about an HD RSN, the rebuttable presumption would apply. And the fact that the complainant may carry the SD feed of the RSN would not be sufficient to refute the rebuttable presumption.
What about for other types of programming that might be subject to a complaint?
Again, well, the rebuttable presumption only applies to RSN. So if you're talking about non-RSNs, again, we would consider the SD and HD distinct. But again, in those cases, the burden would always be on the complainant to demonstrate significant hindrance. And there's no rebuttable presumption involved in those cases.
This is a little more of a policy question. Deciding the initial complaints, should there be any, these would be new complaints submitted under these rules. Will this be done on delegated authority, or would this be a full commission item?
I think historically we've decided these items on delegated authority. I'm not aware why we would deviate from that, but I think it would depend on the facts of the given case.
Quick record keeping, is it 45 business days or 45 calendar days for the defendant, if you will, for the respondent to file the response to a complaint under these new procedures?
Anytime, and there's a general FCC rule for how you compute dates for meeting deadlines, and anytime the filing period exceeds 7 days, you count intervening weekends and holidays. That's in Section 1.4 of the rule. So, yes, it would include holidays and business and weekends when you calculate that 45 days.
Lynn?
Just to clarify, the standstill provision, that's only if you have an existing contract in place. It doesn't help people who are coming to say they won't sell it to me in the first place.
Right. This only applies in the case of renewals where you have the programming, you file a program access complaint, and you want to be able to continue carrying that programming while the complaint is pending. That's correct.
Jonathan, you have some more? Go ahead.
Standstill would apply to any type of program access complaint, whether under the new order or under previous program access rules?
Yes, that's right. It applies to satellite delivered programming or terrestrially delivered programming.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? David, thank you. And that concludes the press conference, and that concludes, what's that? No, since they were just making a presentation, but if you want to, Mark's here. If you have questions, we'll be happy to, address them. But
Okay.
we weren't planning since they didn't have an item.
I just wanted a clarification. There was a mention of 1,500 proposals and thousands of recommendations, I think was the way she phrased it, and I was just
Okay.
wondering what the distinction was.
Let's talk with Mark Wakefield, who's here, and he'll get you to the right person if he doesn't know the answer. That concludes the press conference. That concludes today's agenda meeting. Thank you very much.